Now we're going to start off with the introduction of the study and kind of talk about what our goal is here. In Halton, we know that nonprofit organizations play a really important role in supporting our community and its residents. They address important needs like food security, housing, and overall well-being. Recently, there's been a significant increase in demand for these services, with over 80% of organizations reporting higher usage. This trend is closely linked to the rising cost of living and increasing poverty, which has made it more difficult for many individuals and families to meet their basic needs. For instance, food programs alone saw more than a 25% increase in use, and over 1 in 5 households in Halton are now experiencing food insecurity. While these services are clearly essential in Halton, much of the existing research we have available focuses only on quantitative data. This can overlook the perspectives of those who actually use these services, and this study hopes to address that gap by centering lived experiences and exploring how individuals perceive these supports, including both their strengths and their limitations. We are hoping these insights can help inform responsive services and policies, especially as this demand continues to grow. And now we're going to quickly touch on the background of this study. So across Canada, nonprofit organizations play a critical role in supporting individuals facing social and economic challenges. They provide services like food access, housing support, and opportunities for social connection. Aside from this, the sector is also a major contributor to the economy. They employ millions of people and account for over 8% of Canada's GDP. However, there's been a growing reliance on these services, partially driven by a national affordability crisis. Currently, 1 in 4 households in Canada is food insecure, and nearly 1 1/3 renters are spending over half their income on housing. In the Halton region, these challenges are becoming increasingly visible. Over 13% of residents are living in poverty, which is the highest rate recorded in the past 6 years. Demand for service is continuing to rise, and for example, shelters are at 140% capacity, with longer stays becoming more common. Although there's an increase in service use, much of the local research focuses on statistics rather than the lived experiences of service user. This study will address that gap by using qualitative methods to better understand how individuals experience these supports, including not just their challenges, but also the role these spaces play in fostering connection and belonging. And now I'm going to quickly go over the research questions. So the research questions that we have for the study is, how do community members perceive and utilize local and social community-based services? What sources of support and connection do participants identify in their communities? What existing strengths and positive aspects of community-based supports do participants identify? What unmet needs and gaps in community supports are also identified by participants? And then now I'm going to go over methodology. So this study used a qualitative exploratory design to examine the lived experiences of individuals accessing community-based services in Halton. A reflexive thematic analysis approach was used to guide the study. This allowed for an in-depth interpretation of participants' experiences while acknowledging the role of the researchers in shaping the analysis. In this study, participants were recruited using a purpose convenience sampling strategy through local nonprofit organizations. We contacted multiple organizations and asked them to show service users our research flyer that we had. And in total, 7 participants over the age of 18 who all had recently accessed services in the region were recruited. Their experiences reflected a range of life circumstances and service needs. Ethical considerations were also a key priority throughout the study. Participants provided informed consent. Confidentiality was maintained by removing personal details from quotes and data, and participation was fully voluntary. Participants were also allowed to end the interview at any time and avoid answering any questions without any reason. Interviews were also conducted either in person, online, through secure video platform like Teams. depending on the participant's preference, whatever is easier for them. And continuing with the methodology.
Nope.
Oh, wait, not that far. Okay, go back.
Yeah.
Data was collected through semi-structured interviews, which were between December 2025 and March 2026. Each interview lasted between around 40 minutes to 90 minutes and followed a funnel approach. We started with broad questions about participants' needs and hopes, and then explored their experiences of support and connection, and then finally identified gaps and future possibilities in Halton. Probing questions were also used throughout the interviews to gain a deeper understanding about specific topics. And the interviews were also audio recorded and transcribed verbatim with the participant consent to ensure accuracy. For the analysis, we used Braun and Clark's reflexive thematic analysis. This involves a 6-phase process, starting with familiarization of the data, line by line coding, followed by the development and refinement of themes. In total, we identified 5 main themes and several sub-themes within these main themes. To strengthen the credibility of the findings, we will also go through a member checking process, which we haven't done yet, but it basically allows for participants to review and confirm that the themes reflected their experiences. And now I'm going to let Risha talk to generative journalism because she's an expert on this. So, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Gala. So one of the things that CDH has been doing over the last couple of years is to use something called generative journalism. And so this is an approach to listening, deep listening, that is very person focused, trauma informed, and very cup half full. So you'll reflect back on the name of the project is Thriving Together in Community, not what's our problem, and how can we fix it, but actually, really starting with key questions that really speak to someone's gifts and their strengths, because that is part of thriving. And so the interview questions that we used are: what's most important to you right now? What gives you hope for the future? What helped you feel supported or connected in your community? What positive things are already happening that you'd like to see more of? And what do you need from your community to make those good things happen? And if those good things happened, what might be possible? What we love, we use this for our podcasts. We have like member stories. This generative journalism has a lot of applications. We use it with our project around voice of lived experience in homelessness and the encampment initiative. This centers on people's gifts and people's contributions to community. And that is really important. We can't build with what we don't have. And generative journalism helps us bring those stories alive. It is, again, it's person by person, and it's really quite powerful. And the other thing that I really love is that there's always a call to action. The last question around what do you need from community? And what would happen if you got those things is a really powerful way of ensuring that folks from community have a really good say in action taking for making change in our community. So that's why we use it, and we found it really effective. Usually when someone does an interview using generative journalism, they feel really good afterwards. It's energizing. It brings life.
Thank you, Risha. And now I will go over the results, starting with theme 1, which is navigating essential community supports. So first, participants described a strong reliance on nonprofit organizations to meet their basic needs, especially with the rising cost of living in Halton. The first subtheme in this section is food programs as a key support. Food programs were not just occasional supports, but something many participants depended on regularly to maintain their stability. Some even accessed multiple food banks as part of their routines. A participant stated that the food banks are really important. With the cost of rent, the cost of groceries, you can access them when in need. The second subtheme in this section is shelters and finding houses. Experiences with housing and shelters were more mixed compared to food programs. While some participants faced barriers and unsafe conditions, others highlighted how timely, respectful support like help with rent made a real difference. Another participant stated, stable housing means clean living, no bugs, no mice, no random people coming into your unit. Safety is everything. Now I won't read all the quotes, but they are on the slides for you guys to read while I'm speaking to the sub-themes just because of time. But yeah, overall, this theme shows that while essential supports are vital, the quality and accessibility of those supports can vary significantly and make a difference. The second theme in the results section is beyond services to belonging. Beyond basic services, participants emphasized how important connection and belonging were to their well-being. The first subtheme in this section was the accessibility of connection through virtual programming. Virtual programming played a key role in improving access, especially for those facing transportation or seasonal barriers, while virtual programming allowed for more consistent support. The second subtheme in this section was empathy through shared lived experience. Participants also highlighted the value of peer relationships. Sharing lived experiences can create a sense of understanding and validation that they often don't find in more formal settings. The final subtheme in this section was community and connection. More broadly, these organizations created a space for genuine human connection through peers, staff, and volunteers. This helped reduce isolation and foster a sense of belonging in community. This shows that these services are not just about support, but also about building relationships and belonging. The third theme is systematic gaps and economic barriers. Participants identified several systemic and financial barriers that limit access to care and overall stability. The first subtheme in this section is financial exclusion from wellness and community. One of the most prominent issues was financial exclusion, where rising costs force individuals to make difficult choices like choosing between therapy and basic needs such as food. The second subtheme in this section was fragmented care and geographic barriers. They also described challenges with fragmented care, particularly in mental health services, where a lack of continuity made it difficult to build trust with providers. In addition, geographic barriers meant that some specialized services were simply too far away to access. Together, these challenges highlight how system-level gaps can reduce effectiveness and accessibility of care. Continuing on to theme 3, for systemic gaps. The third subtheme is a need for gender-specific resources. Participants also pointed to gaps in how services are designed and accessed. There is a clear need for more gender-specific resources, particularly for men, as stigma and a lack of targeted support can discourage help seeking. The fourth subtheme in this section was information and system navigation. Another key issue was system navigation. Many participants only learned about available services through word of mouth or during a crisis. This suggests that there may be a lack of coordinated information sharing. The last subtheme in this section is stigma as a barrier to support. Finally, stigma emerged as a major barrier. Fear of judgment often prevented individuals from seeking help, even in urgent situations. This reinforces that barriers are not just financial, but also social and structural, affecting how and whether people access support. Now we'll go on the fourth theme, which is empowerment and resilience. Despite all these challenges, participants also described experiences of empowerment and personal growth through community support. The first subtheme in this section is opportunities to contribute, moving from recipient to contributor. Many participants spoke about the importance of actively contributing to services, whether that's sharing their stories, helping others, or connecting people to resources. This helped create a sense of purpose, agency, and hope in participants. The second subtheme in this section is dignity and choice. Participants emphasized the importance of dignity and choice in service delivery. Being treated with respect and having a voice in their care made a significant difference in their healing process. This theme highlights that community support can go beyond meeting basic needs. It can empower individuals and build long-term resilience. Now on to our last theme, theme 5, which is sector sustainability and worker well-being. Participants also raised concern about the sustainability of these community-based services. Many were aware that the funding limitations affect how organizations operate, particularly when it comes to staffing. The subtheme in this section is workforce stability and funding challenges. Frontline workers were described as underpaid and overextended, with burnout and compassion fatigue being common across the sector. There was also frustration around funding structures that restrict how resources can be used, even when demand for service continues to grow. This suggests that the effectiveness of these supports is closely tied to the well-being of the workforce and the sector itself. Now we will move on to community assets. So this slide highlights the key community assets identified by participants and the impact these services have on their daily lives. Food security emerged as one of the most immediate and ongoing needs, with participants heavily on organizations like food banks and meal programs as a consistent source of support. Some organizations mentioned include Burlington Food Bank, Salvation Army, Compassionate Society, Food for Life, St. Vincent de Paul, Open Doors, and Next Door Social Space. For youth and families, free programs were described as creating safe and supportive environments and providing opportunities that otherwise may be inaccessible. Some organizations mentioned include Halton Children's Aid Society, Halton Women's Place, Halton Women's Center, and SAFE. In terms of mental health and recovery, participants emphasized the importance of flexible community-based supports. Organizations offering peer-led, creative, and virtual programming helped foster connection, confidence, and a sense of belonging. Some organizations mentioned include Support House, Writers Collective of Canada, Virtual Accessibility Key, Capillary Wave, and CMHA. Grassroots groups like the Burlington Dads were also recognized for stepping in to meet immediate needs where formal systems may fall short. Lastly, housing supports were described as critical. Although individuals' experience varied, participants emphasized that timely, respectful support can make a significant difference in maintaining stability. Some organizations mentioned include Support House in the Halton region. Now I will quickly go over the discussion. So these findings highlight the essential role that community-based organizations play in supporting individuals facing economic and social challenges in Halton. Participants identified that flexible and accessible service delivery, especially virtual options, help reduce barriers. They also pointed to the need for better coordination across fragmented systems. Beyond these services, what stood out the most was the importance of belonging, peer support, and human-centered care. Participants consistently valued environments that were non-judgmental, empathetic, and grounded in lived experience. Another key finding was the importance of creating opportunities for individuals to contribute. This creates empowerment, purpose, and stronger community connection. At the same time, systematic barriers such as financial exclusion, stigma, and gaps in services, particularly for men, continue to limit access in the Halton region. Lastly, participants highlighted that sustaining these supports requires greater investment in nonprofit organizations and their workforce, as staff burnout and funding constraints can directly impact service quality. Now we will go over the important part of the research, which is the calls to action, what we need to do next. Based on these findings, several key actions can help improve community supports in Halton. First, improving accessibility and coordination is essential. This includes expanding virtual services and strengthening collaboration across organizations in Halton to reduce fragmentation. Second, services should prioritize human-centered, trauma-informed approaches that promote dignity, inclusion, and a sense of belonging. It is also important to create opportunities for service users to contribute, whether that's through peer support, mentorship, and leadership, because they all foster empowerment and stronger communities. Addressing systemic barriers also remains important, particularly by reducing financial obstacles to care and expanding inclusive and gender-specific supports. In addition, strengthening the nonprofit sector through flexible funding and better support for frontline workers is key to maintaining service quality. Finally, ongoing evaluation that is grounded in lived experience can help ensure services remain responsive, effective, and community-driven, for example, having service users fill out surveys. Now I'll quickly go over the limitations of the study. There are several limitations to consider when interpreting these findings. First, participants were recruited on a voluntary basis, which includes the possibility of self-selection bias. This means that the sample may not fully represent all community members. Additionally, demographic data was not collected, which limits our ability to understand how factors like age, gender, or ethnicity may have shaped these experiences. The small sample size also means that these findings are not fully generalizable to the broader Halton population. Finally, the use of the gift card as an incentive may have influenced participation, particularly by attracting individuals experiencing immediate financial need. These limitations are important when interpreting the findings, and they should be interpreted with caution while still recognizing the valuable insights they do provide. Now, I'll lastly go over the conclusion before we ask participants to jump on and share their experiences. So, in conclusion, this study highlights the value of centering lived experiences to better understand how community-based services are used and experienced in Halton. These findings show that organizations play a critical role in supporting household stability, fostering connection, and promoting personal growth during times of crisis and economic and social difficulty. At the same time, participants identified key areas for improvement, including the need for more coordinated and accessible services, as well as approaches that are more human-centered and non-judgmental. The importance of peer support and belonging and opportunities to contribute also emerged as central to empowerment and long-term well-being. Finally, the sustainability of the nonprofit sector and the well-being of its workforce remains essential to maintaining these supports. Moving forward, strengthening systems of care will require approaches that are more integrated, inclusive, and grounded in dignity, choice, and lived experience. And now we will move on to giving two participants who actually were a part of the study the chance to speak on their experiences of sharing their story with us. We put these two questions together so they would have an idea of what to speak to, but they're free to talk about what they wish regarding their experiences. So first we'll have Liz come on and speak.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. This was an amazing experience. Being asked to share my thoughts, it just means that, like, number one, I'm not alone. I think that's huge because I've seen a lot of people that, we feel like you're the only one going through these struggles and things. So, being able to have input is huge. You feel seen. I felt heard. I did not feel judged whatsoever during this interview, asking these questions. So it's just really nice to have the time to give feedback, input, etc. I know that I would never move out of this area because I do feel truly blessed in what we do have access to. Although the world is tough and getting tougher these days, so it's not perfect. But definitely there is a lot out there in this area. So I'm really thankful for that. So again, it was just simply being heard, being seen, being able to add, and if someone else can gain from my story or be able to gain more support from this, that's that means a lot. So I'm very thankful for this opportunity. So thank you both, Teresa and Gala, for letting me be part of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. We really appreciate that. You made a great reflection on your experience and shared why it's important to share lived experiences. So now we will pass the mic to Michelle, which she will also share her experience.
Good morning. Yeah, this was such a great experience. Like, I hope I can participate in more research studies like this, because as I was speaking, it just felt like what I was saying was so important. And like Liz said, like feeling seen and heard, and like what I could say could help someone else like me who's struggling. So it was just a really amazing experience, and everyone that I chatted with just was so positive. So I was really happy that this was advertised to me through Support House, because every organization that's been helping me through Halton, as I unfortunately had to move away from Halton, I can still access them virtually. So it's just so important that accessibility is still possible without me driving an hour to keep up with all these services. So I'm just so happy this exists, and I hope that there's more advertising and more people find out about what's available, and then hopefully more people that join. Maybe there's more funding. I know that a lot has to rely on volunteers, and volunteers are absolutely amazing, but it's so important for there to be more money, because some people, they would love to volunteer, but they just can't offer their time without being paid. So yeah, I'm just hoping through studies like this and more funding and getting the word out where there's some gaps in care, hopefully more people will have access to more jobs. So people who are really passionate about helping the community can, and they can be paid, and they can pay their bills. So that's it. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much for sharing, Michelle. That was a really good reflection. And now we will go out into breakout room. Actually, if anyone has any questions based off what we just talked about first before we go into breakout.
I know there is a question in the chat, just whether or not we can share the presentation. So we definitely will follow up with everybody. We will send a copy of Gala's slides, and we will also send a copy of the recording as well to everybody who registered. The paper that Gala has written that has all of these beautiful voices incorporated into them still has to be peer reviewed. And so we don't have that ready for you yet. I just want you to know, though, part of our Civic Labs process is that we'll be listening to you today, to any questions that you have, and really encourage you to share in the chat and with us your impressions so that we can actually take your insights and weave that into the paper before we go to peer review. And then we will maybe be reaching out to some of you to have a review of the paper before it goes live. So just wanted to give you that perspective. Yeah, were there questions from anybody about the research, and or thoughts from folks about? I'm just so grateful to Liz and Michelle for their courage to be here today and their graciousness. Lynn. Oh, you're muted, Lynn.
There.
Oh, perfect. Right. Oh, close. You were there.
There.
Good.
Of the 7 people that were part of this, are these people housed? Are they unhoused?
Everybody that we spoke with has a home to call home. So this project was a very broad base. This is not part of our Voice of Lived Experience project through our Community Investment Fund project, but a broader project just to look at thriving together in community. So the Agala noted earlier that we sent it out. We sent it out to a lot of agencies and asked a few times, and we had more than 7 people respond, but then sometimes tagging somebody down or they pulled out at the last minute. So we had probably had 10 interviews set up, but 7 at the end of the 10 was our goal. 7 is what came through, and then we had to set a deadline on call it a day on the data collection process. We could do it again another time for sure, but everybody who came forward, and we tried to make sure that the agencies that we were reaching out to included housing and all sorts of community supports, food security, folks supporting folks with disabilities, all employment supports, all just a whole bunch, a whole range, and yeah, the 7 folks who came forward and participated in the interviews is what we landed with.
Is there going to be something similar for the unhoused?
So our project that we have funded through the Halton Community Investment Fund actually on a very regular basis uses generative journalism questions to speak with folks who are living in shelter, who are living in encampments and broadly in the community to collect that information. So if you go to our website, I can put a link in later, and you can see our monthly briefs on that reflect all of those things. Absolutely. And then we have an annual report from last year. We're starting on our 2nd year report. I'm pleased to say that we'll be continuing that project for the next 3 years. So we do use the same methodology from a generative journalism perspective to share, to collect, to listen, collect, and share stories.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Other questions before we spend a bit of time in small groups? Sorry, I'm not looking at a lot of people here. 2 screens. Not seeing any other hands up. Checking. Mayor Lawlor, welcome. Saw that you popped in here. I think if you're still here, welcome. Lambrina. Oh, you're also muted.
Yes. Well, and thanks very much. I appreciate that I'm able to just kind of hop into this call. It's I'm sorry that I was late, but I do appreciate hearing people's stories. I think is so important for someone in my position to really understand what's happening on the ground, to get a sense of how people are coping through their various situations, because it makes it real. It
Yeah.
and I think only by making things real, uh, we can make change. So,
Mm.
so thank you to everyone who is participating here today. I really appreciate that that you are being honest and forthright, and helping us to understand how we can make things better.
Amazing. Thank you
Thank you.
so much for being here. Amazing.
Yeah.
Then Verena from Oak Park.
Fantastic work, Risha, and really appreciate what everybody has shared. And I echo Mayor's comments. Just curious, of the 7 people, what towns and municipalities were able to be represented? I know that not everyone responded with
Yeah.
community members and peers that would have been comfortable participating, but a sense of,
Yeah.
is
Great
it
question.
Burlington, Milton, Oakville,
Yeah.
Burlington?
I'll be honest, it was mostly the South, Oakville and Burlington. We tried really
Okay.
hard
Yeah.
to get the North. So this is a work in progress and something that our team is very intent on. Please come to the Georgetown Public Library on Saturday to talk about housing. We are, yeah, always really trying hard. We were very intentional in reaching out to agencies that are serving folks in Milton, in Halton Hills. But I'll be honest, we're not successful in getting anyone to participate. We were close. We were close. Um, and that didn't work out.
No, it's still
Yeah,
amazing.
but it's important.
Really amazing. It's
Yeah,
more
yeah,
curious.
yeah, absolutely. And we do know that people are generally more services are in. I can, don't have a map for you today, but more of our social services and supports are actually in the South. I did, I'm going to put us into small groups in a second with the questions, but and Donnell has a question. I just want to say the number of agencies that were mentioned was incredible. For 7 people to mention that many different agencies, I thought that was a really strong indicator of the navigation skills of folks in community, and 2, the depth of care and service and opportunity in community. Donnell, one last question, then we'll go to small groups.
I just wondered the age range of this population.
Oh, yes, we didn't ask people's ages. That was not part of the study, but everybody was 8. You had to be an adult, a consenting adult, so everyone had to be over 18. And I don't like to hazard a guess. I did meet most people, but everybody was in their 20s through into maybe their 50s. So a bit of quite a range in the adult years, but no youth. We did not
Okay,
interview.
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just wondered if you could tell what population you captured, whether it was very young, very old, all young, that kind of thing.
Yeah. No, quite a range age-wise in terms of adult. So thanks for everyone's questions. I'm going to share the questions for small group, because we are going to take a moment. Again, this is so important to us, so don't be shy. And if you are shy to go into a group, I'll stay back for you and you can just talk to me. Hopefully you feel safe with me. But the questions that Gala's prepared are, how can we make sure the voices that are lived experiences are centered in our work? This is so important. So that could be if you're paid employment or if you're a volunteer supporting